Hello, today we're going to do a vlog on Afghanistan. It's the 14th of August 2021. The Taliban have just reported they've captured their 17th provincial capital out of 34 capitals in Afghanistan. We need to give you some background. We watched a lot of American videos and vlogs and blogs, and the level of coverage is very poor. They act as if people have never heard of Afghanistan, as if it was something a meteor approaching from outer space, and we're all we're all in danger. We're not. Here's some background. From our library, we've got Return of the King. This is by William Dalrymple, written in 2013. It's about the first Afghan war with the British, 1839, and the second Afghan war, 1842. Very good background. It examines Afghan social history. Another source, Fred Smith, Dust of Uruzgan. Uruzgan was the province given to Australia. Out of the 34 provinces, we were given one. The British were given Helmand. The Americans were given other provinces. Each NATO ally was given a province to look after. And we did pretty good in Uruzgan, although we lost 27 troops killed. That's a good appreciation by a Foreign Affairs Department person on the ground who was in daily contact with Afghans. Accidental Guerrilla by David Kilcullen. He's an Australian colonel who had got a PhD at one of our universities and then was borrowed by the Americans and stayed there. He helped engineer in 2007 he engineered the big push in Iraq, the surge, which saw the defeat of the insurgency there. Then he moved to Afghanistan, which he saw was a much more difficult kettle of fish. This is Dirty Wars by Jeremy Scahill. He's an undercover reporter with a British news outfit, and he talks about the background to the different wars, how America deliberately sought these wars, infiltrated these wars. There are illegal killings. You can also watch his Dirty Wars video on, I believe, Vice channel on the internet. He's had his life threatened. All of his sources have had their lives threatened. There's a secret war going on. What you see in the papers is not really what's going on, but it's just too difficult for the general public to understand because they've been deliberately dumbed down. I don't like to say that, but we've been taught since World War II to see the world in two shades, black and white, good, bad, black hat, white hat, binary opposition. More familiar with that term. All the way through our schooling and through our so-called university system, we've been brainwashed into thinking a certain way. And when someone like this says, hey, the good guys are really the bad guys, and the bad guys aren't so bad, dung, this book sits on the shelf. Now this is about Ian McPherson's Soldiers Without Borders. It's about what happens, the sort of people who are fighting the shadow war. The Russians started doing it in Chechnya, 1994-5. The Americans like the idea, so they've got people who do one term in the military and then quit because, for whatever reasons, they get recruited by what are called private military contractors. And in America's effort in Iraq for 150,000 troops, they had parallel to them 150,000 private troops. Now, traditionally these were called mercenaries. Now they're called PMCs because it's more politically correct. So this is a story of their fighting role. This is a biography by an English Simon Chase, and he's got a writer, Ralph Pizzello, who helped him write it. He's not very literate. Zero footprint. It's subtitled "A True Story of a Private Military Contractor." He was in Benghazi when the consul was killed, and he had the background story. He was there. He rescued the survivors. So he tells you what happens when a soldier goes to the fighting fronts, and then the day after he quits, he's approached by a recruiter who's a British officer and says, hey, I hear you've got a lot of skills. Your former employers tipped us off. You might want to see a bit of adventure. And they're hired as mercenaries and bodyguards for rich people, for all sorts of people around the world, and they carry out assassinations. And once again, this is the shadow war, which the general public don't understand, they don't hear about, and it doesn't fit into the it's cognitive dissonance. We're thinking, hang on, these are our guys, but they're bad guys. No, that's wrong. Our guys must be the good guys. These days, you've got to stop thinking in black and white. You've got to see everything in shades of grey. It's the only way to understand anything. This is another book, brilliant book, Peter Zeihan, Disunited Nations, The Scramble for Power in an Ungoverned World. Essentially what he's saying is that with the fall of America and the NATO nations, with their general depopulation, with the decline in their population, demographic-wise, they're going to be minuscule compared to the rest of the world soon, and what effect that's going to have on the security of the West. He's primarily concerned with America and the NATO forces, which are American forces in Europe holding down Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So he's more worried about that, but he's looking at the situation. He's given a brilliant summary of how Iran can't dominate the Middle East, how the Saudis play a spoiler role, how China can't ever dominate the world. It's just not possible. He compares them to Japan in World War II, where they were totally dependent on imports, and they were actually forced to attack their own suppliers, which of course is fatal, and that's why China can't win, because they would have to attack America, and America's their biggest market, and they're not going to do that. So he looks at very clear writing, very clear-sighted. Highly recommend all these books. Now, what's the situation in Afghanistan? Well, we're going to look at it in hopefully a couple of vlogs. I'm trying to keep it to 10 minutes because it's too much information to absorb all in one go. So what we're going to do first is look at our first book, which is Return of the King. Now, in 1839, the British decided they were going to topple the Afghan king and replace him with a stooge of theirs who had lived in Pakistan, which was British India, for about 30 years, and he had no contact with the population at all, but they were going to install him and he would be a puppet king of theirs. Strangely enough, in those days, as today, with the massive private military contractor force, imagine 150,000 PMCs roaming around Iraq. You've heard of Blackwater, changed their name to Z. There's many other companies. Apparently, at the last count, the Russians have 5 private military contractors. The best known is Wagner, but there are others taking their place, rivaling them. So when people finish their military conscription in Russia, they get approached, if they're good soldiers, they get approached to go private. Same in Britain and I guess Australia too. So this looks at the situation where the British India, which was a private colony run by the British East India Company, and they attacked Afghanistan. The British East India Company ran with their own private army. They ran India, British India, until about 1857, when there was an uprising and the government was forced to step in and take over and make it a crown colony. So a lot of colonies around the world have been private colonies, private armies. The Dutch had a private colony in Indonesia with its own private army. So we've reverted. After, 150 years, we've gone back to private armies. So mercenaries, that's a disparaging term, but they're private soldiers fighting for private goals, being paid by private companies. We saw that in the Pirates of the Caribbean, one of their series of movies. There was the British fleet was actually private fleet. It's always, the government saves money, they cut costs, and they say, well, we get a private army or private navy to do these things. So this is a result of the war. It looked at basic Afghan conditions. Essentially, there are 2 types of people in the world. If you're a Muslim, there are the Sunnis on one side, and they're led by Saudi Arabia. They make up 85% of the population of Muslims in the world, 1 billion, over 1 billion in the world. The other 15%, which is possibly 150 million, is led by Iran. They're Shia. Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Iran have large Shia minorities or just almost majorities. But given other disparate groups are able to form coalitions, so Lebanon has a Shia government under Hezbollah, Yemen has a Shia uprising under the Houthis, Iraq has a Shia government which the Sunnis are opposing. So anyone who's pro-Sunni gets paid by the Saudis. Saudis are there as spoilers to make sure Iran doesn't get a power base. And now, as of a couple of days ago, in a magazine called Strategy Page, they alleged that the Iranians have 50,000 mercenaries in western Afghanistan. They are returnees from the war in Syria, where they fought under the aegis of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they returned to Iran and then returned to Afghanistan, and now they are a force to be reckoned with. Highly disciplined, led by Iranian generals. This is all one report. We don't know anything about it. We do know there was a Afghan brigade fighting in Syria. They did reasonably well. Now they are the most highly trained force outside of the Afghan army, and they are pledged to defend the Shia in Afghanistan, who make up 20% of the population. So this could form a coalition. You've got Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, a broad-based, a new Persian Empire. Exactly what the Americans didn't want to create. They might have just created it by leaving Afghanistan on the 11th of September this year. This will be the end of the first floor.